Good afternoon. My name is Juan Jose Gonzalez, and you are joining a plenary section called Building Currency in Education Pathways to Address the Teacher Shortage. My co-facilitators, this will be led by Education Systems Center and our esteemed colleagues at the Golden Apple Foundation. So with that, I will kind of I'll let our panelists introduce ourselves. I'll start with myself. My name is Juan Jose Gonzalez. I'm the Pathways Director for Education Systems Center. I've been here now 2 years. In a prior role, I worked at Stanford Children in Illinois, and most recently as the Director of Youth and Education Policy for the City of Chicago Mayor's Office. And with that, I'll pitch it to Pam first, and then Alan.
Thanks, Juan Jose. Hi, everybody. My name is Pam Witmer. I'm the Chief of Staff at the Golden Apple Foundation, and I support Alan, the President of Golden Apple, along with his co-leader, Alicia Winkler, CEO of our organization. In addition to the Chief of Staff roles, I also support one of our 2 preparation programs, the Accelerators Program, which is a concurrent licensure and residency program for career changers, which Alan will highlight briefly later. I started off my career as a teacher and had a winding road through law school, and I've been in education policy ever since. Actually, Juan Jose and I overlapped because when he was at City Hall, I was just 2 doors down on the post-secondary education role there. So it's nice to be back with Juan Jose. Alan.
Thank you, Pam and Juan Jose, and hello, everyone. My name is Alan Mather. I'm the president of the Golden Apple Foundation, as Juan Jose mentioned. I was with the Chicago Public Schools for about 33 years as a teacher, assistant principal, and chief officer of the Office of College and Career Success before coming over to Golden Apple 2 years ago to truly address the teacher shortage. And I am eager to have this discussion with you and how we can work together to truly address what's happening in Illinois, finding great teachers for our classrooms. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. A little bit of a background on the Scaling Education Pathways in Illinois initiative and how this all ties in. So as many people know, if you haven't been paying attention to this graphic during our conference, I welcome you to kind of pay close attention once again, which is, there's a little bit of a coalescing in the state around a state pathways framework and kind of what are the component parts of a pathway. So, increasingly there are many pathway programs, designs include a little bit of individualized planning on behalf of the student that goes not only through secondary, but through post-secondary spaces. There is a greater emphasis on career-focused instruction, which in this context can mean career and technical education, but in reality has become to mean something much broader and more expansive, right? The classic example I sometimes give is AP Computer Science. AP Computer Science is not always funded through career and technical education courses, but any reasonable person can understand AP Computer Science as a career-focused course in the area of IT or perhaps business or what have you, right? So, career-focused coursework now is also broader and more interesting, and we'll give some examples of that in education pathways as well. State pathways should also have a very key focus on work-based learning, right? It shouldn't be an afterthought, but a central part of a properly created pathway. And more importantly, and I think this is a greater emphasis in this education pathway, there should be also an increasing focus on core academic content, meaning English and math, science and social science, and how those courses are deliberate and strategic and complement the career-focused coursework unique to a certain industry sector. And as a kind of pathway has these component parts, a student should be able to move from the secondary space to and through the post-secondary space and earn industry credentials, stackable credentials, degrees, and get more and more skills such that they have access to greater skill level jobs and greater kind of labor market outcomes. Prior to the Post-Secondary Workforce and Readiness Act, which was passed in 2016, there wasn't really a way to kind of indicate or signal that a high school student had been involved in a pathway at the high school space and that they had kind of any sort of success along a pathway. So with that, the state's PWR Act created this notion of a pathway endorsement, a college and career pathway endorsement. And what that is a marking on a student's high school transcript and a sticker on their diploma that they have completed some multi-year experience in a pathway and kind of all the 4 parts that we've described here on the left, and the marking is now on their high school diploma as well. As you can see here, a student would have all those component parts, would be on their diploma and their transcript, and students can start to signal to post-secondary and potentially employer partners that they have a certain level of expertise in various pathway areas. What you see here on your screen are the various kind of industry sectors that a student can earn a college and career pathway. I think of these sometimes as like comparable to like a college major or a college minor, within broad departments, right? Finance and business, information technology. What you all should also know is that within these broad 7 categories, there's also like subcategories and sub pathways, right? So in information technology, for example, you can have a pathway in computer science, but you could also have a pathway in networking technology, right? And likewise, and more importantly, for education pathways, an education or teaching pathway would fall under the category of human and public services. But also that within that category would be something like criminal justice, right? Or kind of firefighter training or things of that nature. So just keep in mind that these 7 categories are supposed to be in CUMP, and they line up with the national SOC codes, and it's somewhat overlap with SIP codes as well. What you should also know is that for each kind of industry sector, this college and career pathway endorsement went a step further and created a set of technical competencies that a high school student will be able to display upon completion of their pathway endorsement requirements. So, we created this document, kind of the recommended technical and essential employability competencies. Link to this slide deck on this page, you'll be able to kind of hyperlink and click on this image, and it'll take you to kind of the PDF guide of the recommended employability competencies as well. So for each of these kind of industry sectors, we really went above and beyond to make sure that to write out competencies for each industry sector, but more importantly, those competencies indicate that a student is immediately ready to either enter into an entry-level job or immediately begin a post-secondary degree or program in that industry sector, right? So a student earning a pathway endorsement in potentially like IT should be able to get an entry-level job in IT, maybe as like a Geek Squad help desk supporter, but also start studying academically rigorous coursework in the IT field. The competencies also pay attention in particular to general employability, essential employability competencies, sometimes called essential skills or soft skills or things of that nature. The competencies also pay attention to this, and it's also noted in the document as well. This slide here, for those of you who are kind of really familiar, but if you're not, I'm going to just give a brief overview. These are the very specific requirements of the college and career pathway endorsement that a student must complete in order to earn the endorsement on their high school diploma, right? So as you can see, those categories mirror the state's pathways framework, which includes individualized learning, some professional learning or work-based learning with very specific categories of things to do. But for the purposes of this kind of aspect, there's also a big focus on certain career-focused coursework, right? A student must complete 2 years of coursework in that career industry-focused area, and some of that coursework must be for at least 6 hours of early college credit. Typically, that might mean an AP class or a dual credit or dual enrollment course, but it's not limited to that. It could also mean articulated credit. In Chicago, it can be IB credit or things of that nature as well. The college and career pathway endorsement in regards to work-based learning has a particular emphasis on team-based challenges or project-based learning, in addition to the typical like job shadows and career exploration activities. And there's also a very fixed requirement of 60 hours of paid or for credit internship, clinical placement type experience that is not that's many times happens already in CTE placements, but is not as deliberate about the number of hours a student must earn in that field. Finally, I will then also indicate that for a student to graduate with the college and career pathway endorsement, they also must be academically ready for post-secondary success. What that typically means that they must place into college level coursework either at the four-year university or at their local community college. And a student can place into college level coursework through a significantly high SAT score in math and English, passing some dual credit or AP classes in math and English, or as increasingly popular in our state, through the implementation and passing of a transitional math or a transitional English course. The idea kind of with the college and career pathway endorsement is that a student is really able to succeed at the post-secondary level, right? This is a little bit different than what has been done traditionally in either CTE or maybe old pathways frameworks, in that CTE courses are very much following a pre-designed program of study. There's somewhat an emphasis on complying with the program of study according to Perkins funding. Sometimes some districts have a very good focus on industry credentials. Well, the pathway endorsement is not restricted to CTE courses, and it has more of a focus on earning early college credit and kind of getting student ready for the rigors of a college level education, right? In terms of work-based learning, lots of kind of programs or pathways have already had things like job shadows and internship placements. But in this particular case, there's now a unique quantifiable amount of work-based learning activities that the student must complete, right? The student must do 60 hours of internship experience, 2 team-based challenges, so on and so forth, right? And in regards to college readiness, many times CTE programs or some pathway programs had too much of a focus on immediate career entry. And what this is focused is college and career, right? The student must be able to enter the career, but they must also be able to ready immediately to kind of launch themselves into post-secondary success and coursework, right? So students must have a plan and a set of strategic courses to make sure that they're ready for that. So that is kind of an overview framework on the college and career pathway endorsement. And now I want to kind of talk about how its implementation through an initiative we did called Scaling Education Pathways in Illinois. So Scaling Education Pathways in Illinois got its start in 2019. It's really a product of private philanthropy, specifically the Joyce Foundation, but also the state's P20 Council. Right, and the state has a teacher leadership education committee and a college and career readiness committee. Right, the P20 Council, as well as private philanthropy, put together some funds into a pot of funds, and thus created like the Scaling Education Pathways in Illinois initiative, right? Which was the idea was to address the teacher shortage by funding community collaborations that would build specifically an education pathway that starts in high school, goes through college, and then culminates with a teacher placement back at a home district or a district similar to that. Once again, as I've mentioned before, I have some hyperlinks for you all. For those of you accessing this deck, here the CEPI pilot, we have our CEPI webpage, which more detail that you guys can check out afterwards or during this report. So what is kind of unique about CEPI relative to the other pathway endorsement aspects, right? So in addition to implementing a college and career pathway endorsement, our CEPI collaboratives or CEPI kind of network must really be deliberate about transitioning students to a post-secondary institution or program with a college of education or a program of or a major or department in education. Our cohort members should also really be thinking about providing placement and initial career supports for students upon completion of their post-secondary degree, right? So there must be some sort of incentive or benefit for students with associates or bachelor's degree in an education-related field, such that they can go back to their home district or feeder districts and start working in that space. And generally, our education pathway cohorts, CEPI members, really have to do a better job of promoting the educator profession and recruiting students into it, right? Yesterday, we had some innovation. We had a session, and I want to call this out. And you can access our recording on our 60 by 25 webinar. I saw a great work by the Plainfield School District that even created a student-focused recruitment video. Students were kind of talking about their entrance into the education pathway and recruiting other students into that as well, and kind of talking about the benefits of a diversity in education and having diverse teachers in the classroom. So I feel like that's a very valuable resource that all of you should kind of be thinking about as promoting a pathway space. This is the scale of kind of our CEPI initiative. We support around 15 collaboratives representing 16 school districts and 25 high schools. Our support really is focused around communities of practice, guiding participants through the pathway endorsement process and authorization with ISB. But our model is not unique, right? We also have the Illinois State Board of Education has really kind of complemented our work and doubled down in of itself. The state has funded specific education pathways, enhancing existing CTE programs, and they've put a lot of money with grants to school districts or to EFEs of up to $250,000 to implement similar pathway frameworks. You can see here on your right, obviously, we also have a good slice of school districts that are urban, suburban, and rural, which I think is a very important kind of theme of our conference, and making sure we pay attention to rural communities, the recruitment of students into post-secondary success, and then kind of cycling back to fill teaching positions that are the desperate need in the rural communities as well. What this has all been working and building towards, and this is, I commend a lot of the work of my colleagues, John Furr, Heather Penzak, and generally the EdSystems teams, is we've been building towards building currency for these education pathways, right? Many folks have told us, well, what is the unique benefit of a college and career pathway endorsement? What is, like, do employers really recognize it, right? So what we have kind of been working in the last 6 months or so is to really being focused on, in regards to education, is that there is being real currency at the post-secondary level, right? Our research has shown that in order to have a living wage occupation in education and teaching, you really have to go through a bachelor's degree program and then eventually kind of get placed at those living wage jobs. So getting currency first with the post-secondary institution and then to kind of those employers partners would be very valuable. I want to just call out that recently in the month of February, NAU's College of Education announced new incentives, new scholarship opportunities for those high school students that graduate with the college and career pathway endorsement. Once again, on the slide, you would be able to click on this link here and see the details of a fact sheet and the process that a student can go through that. I also want to call out that a recent education bill, HB 2170, known as the Education Omnibus Bill, really included an updated language to the Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship. That's in a pre-existing scholarship in the state, such that students who earn pathway endorsements can then also become immediately eligible for the Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship. In particular, they can earn that scholarship before they even matriculate into a college of education, so then speeding their access to those scholarship funds. And what we're going to get into right now, and what I consider the Cadillac of these currency partnerships, would be our partnership with the Golden Apple Scholars Foundation and the Golden Apple Scholars Program. And I'll let them I'll turn it over to them to kind of provide more detail.
So during this part of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about Golden Apple, who we are, what we do, our scholars program specifically, and then we'll talk about why we've decided to partner with CEPI. We think this is just a rich opportunity for our entire state. So first, many of you might know Golden Apple as the awards program. And 36 years ago, we were founded as a way to honor outstanding teachers. And we continue to honor outstanding teachers. In fact, on Tuesday of this week, I hope you saw the announcement that we have 32 finalists for the Golden Apple Award for Excellence in Teaching, which we will winnow down to 10. But our mission has changed. We still honor teachers, but really we are committed to addressing the teacher shortage across the state. And we do that through two programs. The one we're going to talk about the most today is the Golden Apple Scholars Program. This is where we recruit high school seniors through sophomores in college, Illinois residents who go to Illinois colleges and universities and agree to teach in Illinois schools of need for at least 5 years. The other program, the one we launched just this year, was the Golden Apple Accelerators. And this is a program for those with bachelor's degrees, career changers, or seniors in college who did not go through schools of education in southern, central, and western Illinois, primarily rural communities. And in 15 months, they earn a license and go through a residency program. After in year 2, they are teachers of record in their schools. But like I said, we're going to focus on the Golden Apple Scholars Program here. And so I'd kind of like to walk you through a little bit of our model before turning it over to Pam to discuss a little bit more. So here's kind of the model we use, and we'll have a few graphics. So first of all, we recruit a diverse group of scholars. We want the diversity of our scholar class to be reflected as the state is, and this includes geography as well as racial and ethnic diversity. While our scholars are undergrads, they receive tuition assistance. There is paid professional development in the summer that we'll talk a little bit more about. And they get in-classroom experience, hundreds of additional hours before they ever step into schools as the teacher of record on day 1. As they're nearing toward graduation, they receive placement assistance from us. And during their first 2 years of teaching, they receive mentoring. We have 57 award-winning mentors, all of whom are state certified evaluators. And we know that this is part of what retains teachers in teaching. And in turn, they agree to teach for 5 or more years in schools of need across our state. So this is kind of our journey you're going to see here. I mentioned that we recruit talented young people. Again, we recruit seniors in high school through sophomores in college. We are intentional in our efforts to recruit scholars, and we bring in about 300 each year. That very first year we had scholars, we had 15, but right now we support approximately 1,400 undergrads and those teaching in their first 5 years as we continue to grow. We then prepare them, and we prepare them like no one else. We have academic as well as social and emotional supports for our scholars while they're undergrads. They have cohorts at their colleges and universities, and then we have what we think is our secret sauce, which is our Scholar Institute. And this is what happens at our Scholar Institute. When we're not in a global pandemic, we house our scholars at campuses around the state. Across their time with us in these summers, everyone receives an urban, a suburban, and a rural experience. In the first half of every day, they go and teach summer school, and they teach summer school in schools of need. Sometimes not the experience they get when they're doing their student teaching, but they are in classrooms of need when they're freshmen and sophomores, they're with other teachers. Sometimes when they're rising seniors, they take over classrooms by themselves. Then they come back, and I've mentioned that our legacy as award-winning teachers, they come back from those schools back to the campuses, and they learn from our award-winning teachers. And then they have reflective seminars, and they're able to reflect on those practices. And those of you in teaching know that reflection is something sadly lacking sometimes. I mentioned that we do placement support. And when I say placement, we don't tell our scholars where to go. They can go to any school of need across the state, but we do help them find that best fit and match. We have partnerships with some districts, but we really do want to ensure that they are going to be successful and find that best fit for them. I mentioned mentoring. In the first 2 to 3 years that our scholars are teaching, we call them teaching scholars at this point, they're receiving mentoring from those award-winning mentors. And at the end, after 5 years, they receive their Crystal Apple, fulfilling the mission to Golden Apple and to the state of Illinois that has supported them. So to talk a little bit more about what the benefits are of being a scholar, I'm going to ask Pam to share that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much, Alan. Really appreciate the intro here, and thank you, Juan Jose. So as Alan mentioned, there are a lot of benefits to becoming a Golden Apple Scholar. One of them is, like Alan mentioned, during our summer Scholar Institutes, the scholars, while they're an undergrad, receive in person, as Alan mentioned, when we're not in a global pandemic, teaching experience. And we were able to navigate and pivot quickly for the summer in 2020 and provide our scholars with virtual teaching experience, which is also proven to be quite helpful for those scholars who did graduate and start teaching full-time this fall. In addition to that, during the Scholar Institutes, as Alan mentioned, we do provide a lot of professional development and additional resources. One thing I'd like to hit on a little bit more is the academic and social emotional support that we provide scholars while they're in undergrad. So this can range from just meeting one-on-one with our scholars. We have an academic and social emotional supports team, and they have coffee talks, they meet one-on-one, they check in with the scholars to see how they're doing, not only in their coursework, but also outside of their coursework. They also provide other experiences for the scholars to connect. That's been extremely helpful this year with the pandemic and everyone being slightly more disconnected. So that can range from things like trivia nights to other opportunities to hang out together online. And then we also provide scholars with an opportunity to participate in affinity groups. So the affinity groups range from individuals who are participating in ones for scholars of color, and we also have an affinity group for scholars who are teaching or plan to be teaching in rural areas. And as Alan mentioned, we do provide a lot of job placement assistance. So we have a team that is dedicated specifically to helping those scholars find that best fit match. We also provide them with mock interview experience over the summer and with resume support to make sure that that resume really does pop and can help them land the job that is the best fit for them. And then, as Alan mentioned, we also provide the mentoring support for those first 2 years, which has proven to be really crucial to helping our scholars stay in the classroom. So as Alan mentioned, we do provide tuition assistance. Our tuition assistance and stipends that the scholars receive throughout their course of their career being a scholar is up to $23,000. Broken it down there for the first 2 years of undergrad and the second 2 years. It's adjusted slightly if we have scholars that come in later on. We recruit high school seniors through sophomores in college. And then each summer when the scholars are participating in Scholar Institute, they receive a $2,000 stipend because it is an intensive program. And we recognize that there's not a lot of opportunity to have outside work while participating in this program. So through all of these supports, we do have a good amount of results that we are proud to share. So throughout the history of our program, over half of our scholars have been scholars of color, which you can compare that to the national number of around 20% of teachers are teachers of color. And 82 seems to be our magic number as it floats through 3 different bullets here. So in 2020, 82% of our scholars made the Dean's List, and 82% of them over the last 3 years have earned their college degree within 6 years. And then lastly, 82% of our scholars remain full-time teachers beyond that 5-year commitment. So they make that 5-year commitment, but because of the supports and the community that we have here at Golden Apple, a lot of them are staying in the classroom even longer than the 5-year commitment, which is nearly double the national average. So, and Golden Apple scholars do reflect the students that they serve. So if you take a look at the slide here, you can see again the breakdown of Golden Apple scholars compared to what is the Illinois teacher breakdown of teachers of color, which remains right around 18%. And on this slide, we just kind of have a snapshot of our 2020 scholars class. As you can see, we've got a lot of scholars in our program. So we received over 2,000 applications last year, and we selected 300 scholars. They are working on their license and degrees at our 48 partner higher institutions across the state. And they're pursuing licenses in several fields, but a lot of them in high needs fields like STEM, special education, and bilingual education. Our Scholar Institutes that Alan mentioned and I mentioned again are a big production. We have a lot of people participating. This year we had over 800 undergraduates who participated in our Scholar Institutes this summer. And right now we have 600 scholars across the state who are, as Alan mentioned, there are teaching scholars. They're in their first 5 years of teaching. And they're all over the state. They're at every corner and teaching in pre-K through high school. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Alan to talk a little bit more about the CEPI partnership and how individuals who are in that pathway can become a Golden Apple Scholar. So Alan.
Thanks so much again, Pam. And yeah, this was kind of a no-brainer for us. I mean, we understand the value of this partnership. You know, students who earn that Pathway Endorsement undertake significant early college work and meaningful work-based learning opportunities. I mean, our Scholar Institute provides some, but they're getting them in their own schools or in their own communities. And we're confident that these scholars are going to be an asset to our program. You know, they've had the curtain pulled back a little bit on what it means to be a teacher. So they're going in with eyes wide open. And we think that that's going to help them become exceptional educators serving in high need areas across the state. And so this is what the partnership looks like, and this is what it means. You know, we've talked about how we retain students at high levels, and we retain them even more if they know what they're getting into. We think CEPI students are ideal candidates because they're coming in with college credit, and thus they're more likely to persist. So you can see the deadlines that we come up with. Our application closes on April 1st. Now, what happens if a student is part of a CEPI program is that student automatically gets moved to the final stage of our process, that final interview process, because we know that they are prepared and ready, and we don't want them to have to go through all the earlier stuff. Yes, they fill out the application. Yes, they have the letters of reference, but they're moving on to the last round of our application process. We do help with that best fit placement. About 80% of our scholars return to within 17 miles of where they grew up and teach in those communities. So we're not an importer and exporter of talent. Typically, they return to those communities from whence they came. So we just think this is the ideal group of people to go in to this program. So how do we recruit? So we're encouraging all of your students who are earning the Pathway Endorsement to apply to our Scholars Program. Pam, could you advance to slide 33? Thanks. By April 1st. We have, as I mentioned, a number of formal district partnerships. And what that means with a formal district partnership is we give you kind of additional access to scholars. So you see the talent pool who is out there. We have special hiring events for them. And we ask you to volunteer at our mock interviews. And I can tell you, as a former principal who went to these mock interviews, I hired some really outstanding teachers who I met before they, as they were rising seniors, but I got to know them early and get a little contact information on them. But we also encourage you to host scholars for student teaching. We think this is a great way for you to get to know our scholars, for our scholars to get to know your districts. And we're working with many of the institutions of higher ed right now to say, will you give us some flexibility? So A, our scholars will teach in schools of need, and B, they're going to be in supportive classrooms where they know that they can grow and learn. So those are part of what we do around school district recruitment. Our partnership with CEPI is absolutely key to doing this well. And we hope that you will consider bringing more of your students into the Golden Apple community to come back and teach in your own community.
If I may add one thing for folks is, for those of you that are part of the high school district and are coming to us from high school districts or partner with high school districts, if your high school district is implementing an education pathway, but is not yet authorized as an official college and career pathway endorsement district, the Illinois State Board of Education will be going live in the next week or a few weeks with that application process for districts, right? So districts will be able to once again kind of show the component parts of their pathway to ISB. ISB will then be able to say, yes, this is a legitimate college and career pathway endorsement offerings. You are authorized now to start tracking students towards the college career pathway endorsement. I find that similar and comparable to a process like getting a district certified for the state seal of biliteracy. And then, once you're certified by the state, it's up to the individual district to kind of keep its records and in order to track which students have earned that seal of biliteracy. In this case, which students have earned the college and career pathway endorsement. Those of us at EdSystems are more than willing and helpful to help you kind of figure out that process, that dynamic. Does your kind of education pathway or program meet the requirements of the pathway endorsement? We have a lot of webinar information sessions and offer a lot of technical assistance. So really welcome that. And then also, obviously there's going to be a lot of new districts this year coming on board with authorization for the pathway endorsement. And students won't have earned that endorsement until they graduate high school in June. So kind of the agreement we did with Golden Apple is that a student would just be able to show a letter from a principal or a counselor saying that they are on track to earning the endorsement or have already completed the parts, and we'll be able to further verify it with their transcript later in the school year. Alan and Pam, there was some question from some colleagues about kind of which higher ed institutions you partner. I think there was a number of mentioning of 48, but if you can provide a little more detail or color to kind of how those partnerships come about and things of that nature, that'd be, I think, very helpful for everyone to kind of hear.
Sure. We have support, a great deal of financial support that comes from the state legislature. And part of that agreement is that there is an institution of higher ed that has an education program, we partner with them. I mean, they have Golden Apple scholars. So the tuition support they receive goes directly to the college or university. But we also ensure that there's a liaison at each and every campus. So yes, if someone goes to Illinois State University, there are about 190 scholars at Illinois State. If someone is at Blackburn College, there are approximately 4 scholars at Blackburn College. So the size of the cohort is very different depending on the college or university, but we partner with anyone who has a college or school of ed.
So for those of you who've kind of like sent us questions directly in the chat box, we've kind of made an attempt to respond to all of those and give examples. If there's any more questions or concerns, we would love to hear any more questions. There's a question from Fanny about, has COVID-19 impacted recruitment and retention in either of the programs? I'll pitch it to Alan, it seems. Go ahead.
Thanks. And maybe Pam can talk about the accelerators, but I will tell you, Fanny, that right now the number of students who not necessarily have started but have completed the application for the Golden Apple Scholars is higher than ever before. So while the application process is not closed, we had about 2,000 who applied last year for those 300 that we accepted. We know that the supply and demand is working out. There are more people who want to be scholars in Illinois. We have about 1,500 at this point, but we have more than 150 who at this point have actually completed the process and fully submitted that application. So they're getting it done earlier than they ever have before. Pam?
Thanks, Alan. And for our accelerators program, the application just closed last week. And our overall numbers of the people who started the application is slightly lower, but similar to the Scholars Program, the number of individuals who have completed the application is up about 20%. So last year, our cohort for the Accelerators Program was smaller. It was 30 students. We're hoping to grow it, but we are reliant on state funds, so it's dependent on what comes through at the end of spring. But right now we're in a good spot. So the word is spreading, and we have 22 partner school districts right now that are hosting our accelerators for the residency portion of the program, and we're hoping to grow that.
Thank you all for this kind of joining us on this plenary. Seeing no further questions, and look forward to kind of partnering with you all more in the near future. So thank you very much. And thank you, Alan and Pam.